And our final presentation today is S073, Fundamental Use of Surgical Energy Certification, Validation and Predictors of Success, to be presented by Dr. Robinson.
So I'd like to thank the program committee. It truly is an honor to present today. And I'd like to thank the Fuse group, because I do think I'm undeserving of being up here. There's many deserving members, from the chair, who is Dan, and Pascal and Leanne, and Amin is out there. And I appreciate everything that the Fuse group has done to advance energy. And the title of our abstract is Fundamental Use of Surgical Energy, Certification, or Validation and Predictors of Success. And then we did have a disclosure slide in there. About half of the authors, 40%, do have an industry relation, but we are only validating and suggesting predictors on our tests, so there's no conflict in this talk. I apologize to the chairs, that slide wasn't there. All right, so everybody uses energy, right? And yet a lot of us don't understand the energy devices we use. We just set it on 30-30 and we go, and not received any formal training in energy-based devices. And that's really the gap in knowledge that Fuse was created to address. And so Fuse consists both of a didactic curriculum that's available online and a high-stakes multiple-choice exam. And the goal is really to provide certification on a basic set of knowledge on the safe use of surgical energy-based devices. And the purpose of this study was twofold. The first one was to set a passing score through a psychometrically sound process. And the second was to determine what pre-test factors of the individual test-taking candidates predicted success in passing the Fuse examination. So the methods of doing this, there was a very rigorous process in developing a 72-test question test. So we started with 10 topics that we thought were fundamental to understanding the safe use of surgical energy. And then we broke it down to 62 test objectives, and there was a minimum of 3 test questions written on each one of those test objectives, some of which then got tossed out based on how they worked out with the test takers. And so for this manuscript, there's 2 purposes, and the first was to demonstrate whether or not the test that was created was valid using the modified Angoff methods. And then the second one was just before the test takers took the test, they answered 18 questions about their baseline demographics. And so we wanted to see what characteristics of a test taker predicted if they would pass the test. So 227 individuals participated, and 92% of them completed the pre-test survey, so those would be part of the second specific aim. And the test was completed in 2 forms, so in order to validate a test, they do it in 2 different forms. And Form 1 was a little less than half the people, and Form 2 was a little bit more than half the people. And here's the distribution of correct answers. And this is for Form 1, which was the first 47% of individuals. The mean score for Form 1 was 55.6 questions answered correct, and on Form 2 was 55.5 questions answered correct. So the distribution of correct answers was very similar between the first and second form. 81% of total test takers passed the test. And then comparing these using the modified Angoff statistic methodology, it was found that the Fuse examination was psychometrically sound. And then if we move on to aim 2, which is just to look at which test taker characteristics predicted passing, more years in surgical practice did not predict who would pass the Fuse exam. And I would just suggest to the crowd that this is in departure from what FES and FLS found, right? So FES and FLS, with advanced training, more of those folks pass the test. And so the Fuse is different from the FES and FLS in this characteristics, and that's why I included this slide. And then on the logistic regression, where the dependent variable was passing the exam, You can see that we have the odds ratio and then the 95% confidence interval. And so, again, the top row is practicing surgeon attending compared to junior surgeons, and that was not statistically related to whether or not the individual passed the test. What was greater than 2 hours of studying of the online fused didactic curriculum. So a minimum of 2 hours of studying had an odds ratio of 3.61, and you can see the lower shoulder of the confidence interval is 1.44, so that was significant. And then if you studied it for more than 4 hours compared to somebody who did it 0 to 2 hours, the odds ratio went up to 3.79. Participating in the FUSE postgraduate course, which we had one yesterday morning, was not statistically related to whether or not the individual passed the test, and reviewing the FUSE manual, so there's a book that is published, did not forecast somebody passing the test. And so the one thing that did was at least studying this online. It's a free online didactic program that takes probably 5 to 6 hours to complete, but doing it for at least 2 hours was predictive of passing the test. So in summary, the development of the FUSE examination, including the cutoff score, followed a psychometrically sound process, and self-reported studying time of at least 2 hours predicted a passing score independent of other pre-test characteristics, and most notably advancing years in practice. So once again, we'd like to thank the research committee for selecting our abstract. We truly are privileged to be able to present today. Thank you.
So it seemed like the manual should be maybe thrown out, or at least not reviewed. So have you thought about changing some of your supplemental study materials? If the postgraduate course didn't seem to show a statistically significant improvement in passage rates, and the manual seemed to deter passing, have you thought about revamping some of your materials? Yeah, so I don't, well, so that's a good point, and I don't think we should throw out the manual. There's a FUSE book, and I don't think the FUSE book is geared directly towards the questions that are on the test. You know, I think it's a more broad review of the topic of energy-based devices, and so if you think about that as not a large book, but as a book, you know, the actual key points get diluted down, and I don't think that that was as accessible. And then as for the postgraduate course, yes, we've tailored it since the beginning, you know, and the number of surveyors or the number of test takers who actually had done the postgraduate course was very low. And so that confidence interval was wide because, you know, it was a lot of training programs and residents who hadn't come to the initial postgrad courses. But yes, our postgrad course has changed, and we really are highlighting these objectives now. So both of those points are great.
My question is kind of a follow-on to that. You had quantified intervals of review of the online material. Was the question on the, and I should remember this because I was in this group, but was the question on the survey, did you review the book, or was there a quantification? Did you study the book for 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours? How was that
I don't remember
asked?
the specific question, but it just asked if they had been exposed to the book or read the book. And again, like the FUSE didactics, it didn't specifically state, you know, which part of the didactics that you looked at. It tried to quantify it in terms of hours, but really to read that whole book would be, you know, a 20-plus hour endeavor, so I'm not sure people would have read the whole book.
Sure, I was just wondering if it was broken down at all, or if it was just,
Is a yes, it was a binary yes, no.
I think it's an excellent program that clearly is identified and trying to fill in a gap in knowledge amongst both practicing surgeons and trainees, and so we certainly applaud your work.
Thank you.